Captain America Civil War has divided the Marvel Cinematic Universe as we know it, and I am sitting here with Christopher Markus and Stephen McFeely to talk about the movie and get into the nitty-gritty of one of the, maybe the biggest movie in the MCU to date, I'd argue.
Just the whole universe.
Just literally the whole universe, all film as we know it. Well, thank you both so much for being here. And I'm just going to dive right into it. I mean, this movie really faces the aftermath of basically every Marvel movie that came before head on. So how important was it for you guys to deal with the fallout of the previous films in the franchise?
It was absolutely part of the design from the very beginning. We had, Marvel in general had looked at all the third acts that they'd made over the last few years and noticed a bit of a similarity, but it's certainly an accruing theme, this idea of collateral damage, and every time we solve a problem, we tend to rain stuff on top of cities, and maybe that would lead to some problems. So we were always going to start there, in terms of, what does it mean to be a hero, and what does it mean to have this power, and how do you share it?
How do you think this movie will affect the future Marvel films going forward? Simply in the sense, like, we dealt with the aftermath of these big collateral battles. Yeah. Can the films keep getting away with having those battles?
Well, you can have them. You just have to think about them a little more. And if you hurt people, you have to have them screaming and wailing right there in the street. No, I think the aftermath is that it leaves the Avengers scattered. It leaves Earth vulnerable for what we know might be coming.
A little tiny two-part movie called Avengers Infinity War, which you guys just happen to be working on.
It's more of a stage play. It's very small.
You can see this movie on Broadway. I am curious, like, one of the things that really impressed me about this movie was how you were able to take an Avengers-worthy amount of characters and really give each of them their moment, each of them their time in the spotlight. What did you learn about balancing so many characters that you're going to apply going forward?
To only bring them in when the story needed them to come in, so that we didn't start out with everybody in the clubhouse going, I wonder what's going to happen today, and then an alarm goes off and they all race to the fire pole. So Spider-Man comes in when you need Spider-Man. Ant-Man comes in when you need him. And everybody is triggered by the plot rather than the other way around, so that we weren't labored with the necessity of coming up with subplots for each person where, meanwhile, back at Clint's house, he owes money to a guy, and that's happening at the same time. It was all one central spine, just with people sticking out of it.
That comes from the confidence of now 13 movies, right? So Marvel Studios can say to very famous, excellent actors, would you please come for just a few weeks? You're only in a few scenes. We're going to try to make them meaningful, but the character will out. You're not carrying this movie.
And we also didn't have to set them up. Everyone's up and running now, aside from a couple guys who. One had 5 movies that seemed to explain him pretty well, so we could just pop Spider-Man in there, and Panther.
Well, the Spider-Man stuff, I know for a lot of people, the response has just been overwhelmingly positive. Like, you guys just really nailed him right from the start, and getting him to be a part of the MCU is a huge moment. But I'm curious, what was your rationale when you were writing him in for why Tony Stark would come to this teenager in Queens that he's heard about instead of maybe some of the other MCU heroes we know are out there, like Daredevil or someone like that?
Right.
Tony doesn't have a television, so he doesn't know about that.
He doesn't know about Hell's Kitchen. It's too far away on the other side of New York.
They're so violent. Well, I think he has been keeping tabs on the world, and he knows about this one kid. I think in some ways there's a motivation, having been accused of killing a young kid earlier in the movie, to, maybe I can rebuild karmically some of what I've lost by helping this kid along. And he's there and he's available, and Tony's desperate.
Well, he probably sees some of himself in this kid.
Yeah,
right. Remember, when you meet this kid, he's clearly a budding scientist, but doesn't have the resources that Tony Stark does.
There is some very obvious setting up for Spider-Man Homecoming in this movie, which I'm sure must have been really exciting for you guys. But maybe it was because the name Spider-Man Homecoming was just announced right before I saw this movie, but the word homecoming pops up a couple times in this film.
Fairly accidentally.
Okay, I was like, is this a coincidence? Should I be reading into this?
No, every future Marvel title is hidden within.
That's right.
Also, I'm sure you guys are aware of that the relationship between Bucky and Steve Rogers has evolved over the years, and fans have sort of taken ownership of it in their own way. And that relationship, I would say, is one of the most central parts of this movie, even though it's Civil War and Iron Man and everything else going on. Were you aware of that fan sentiment at all when you were writing it? Did you leave it open-ended intentionally or anything like that? Or is it just that their relationship is so close that people can...
It does form the spine of the trilogy in many ways,
I mean,
right?
it really is that from a little guy being beaten up in an alley and saved by his much larger friend to everything reversing and coming around. It really is the nearly 100-year thread between the three movies. You know, I think it's a friendship. I think it's a good old-fashioned 1943 friendship between two very well-built men.
Two gentlemen that are very attractive. So, you know, looking at the Civil War comics, I think a lot of people going into this movie, knowing what happened in that story, expected there might be a big main Avenger death at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Why did you decide not to go that way?
It would almost necessitate them coming together.
Too soon?
If you killed somebody on either side, I can't see them not, sort of shaking hands and going, "Oh my God, my bad.
What have we done?
What have we done?" We definitely didn't want to do that. We wanted a third act that got more intense and got smaller but more focused, and left them shattered, so that when big purple guy from space comes, they are really screwed.
I mean, everybody puts aside their differences at a funeral. We didn't want anybody's differences aside.
Well, there was one very emotional funeral in this movie.
Yeah, I know.
And Peggy Carter is a character that you both are very close to. Yeah. So why was this the right time to say goodbye to that character?
Well, I think just chronologically, she's nearly 100. And she was dipping into dementia in the last movie. I'm not sure what kind of scenes we would have ginned up for her now.
We sort of said goodbye to her in that scene in many ways, I think.
And I think, one, she was technically still is alive on television. Knock on something.
Just every surface.
Yeah, exactly. Something's got to be wood around here. But also we knew we wanted the movie to be about Steve fighting for this last remnant of his past in Bucky, and he needs it all the more when Peggy's gone.
Speaking of Agent Carter, its renewal is a little bit up in the air, but it had some crazy cliffhangers at the end of this past season, more so than in season 1. If absolute worst case scenario, it doesn't get renewed, do you guys have any plans to revisit that world in a short or wrap up that storyline?
Should it arise, it'd be delighted.
Yeah.
But
there's a couple loose threads we would like to address.
Yeah.
You never know.
Looking forward to Infinity War. We're so excited about this movie, and we know that it is 2 parts. So as you guys are writing it now, I know you guys are pretty early in the process. How different are those 2 parts of the movie going to feel?
Very.
Yeah.
Because we did Winter Soldier and we did Civil War, and they are based on runs in the comics. But if you know the runs in the comics, we're not slavish to them. We sort of take the best ingredients and make a different thing out of them. So we'll do the same thing with Jim Starlin's stuff and a lot of stuff, that has to do with Thanos. So unlike, say, some other movies that are based on pretty famous books, where someone has to decide where the midpoint is to make these 2 movies, and that's always going to spawn some debate from fans. You could have made one movie, but you stole my money, or why did you stop it there? Why'd you change that? There will be fewer expectations from the source material, I think. You won't know where it's going.
Yeah. Well, sometimes when reading the comic book, you don't know.
It's pretty trippy.
There will be a definite kind of closure at the end of the first movie. It's not just going to end and you go like, I wonder how that's going to play out.
They should be complete experiences.
They're connected, obviously, but yeah, we are actively working to make them feel. different.
You guys have been talking about in other interviews about how there's not going to be like 60 Avengers in one movie. Are you planning on? Or,
We lie
or
a
maybe
lot.
there is not going to be 60. There's going to be 100. Are you planning, as we have these sort of different teams? Our first thought was sort of like Secret Avengers at the end of Civil War.
Yeah.
Are you planning on separating the heroes at all? Like some people have one movie, some people have another.
When outlining it, we certainly had those conversations. I mean, in the same way that in Civil War, not everyone has the same amount of scenes or lines. I think you can assume that with so many characters, we'll have to be as rigorous, right? Well, we say these people will have sort of larger stories and these people will have smaller stories, and hopefully they can flip in some cases. I know of a few right off the top of my head that have a small part here and a bigger part here.
Yeah, the people in the background in one might come to the foreground in the second one. You know, there will be moments where every last damn person who's still alive will be in the same room, and they're just a nightmare to write, because Marvel, being very good about hiring very good actors, you have like the 15th person there has 2 Oscars. God. So yeah, it's crazy.
Well, similarly, you keep talking about the big purple guy, and he's this character who's been kicking around the MCU since Phase 1 now. So Thanos is definitely a character people are familiar with, but we don't know too much about him and his motivations. Right. So I'm curious, like, how are you going to set that up in Infinity War? So say if that was the first Marvel movie that you came into, you would have an understanding of.
Well, we can't tell you what we're going to do, or in the midst of doing, but. He's a fully fledged character. You will know him as well as any other human.
Right. That's right.
This movie will not work unless you there's, in the same way that you feel for both sides of the people in Civil War, and you hopefully feel for Zemo his own way, I want you to feel for Thanos, because otherwise he's just a gigantic purple madman, and that's fun for about 25 minutes, and then it's like just a headache.
But you hired Brolin, give him stuff. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, now you have 2 movies to fill instead of 25 minutes doesn't go too far.
And we can't space it out that much.
Now, Civil War sort of largely ignored some of the, TV show storylines because it was focused so much on the Avengers as we know them.
Yeah. Right.
I'm curious, as, again, you're writing Infinity War now, are you guys going to take the everything in the kitchen sink approach, or do you think that it's still going to focus on the
movies versus TV?
Yeah.
We are open to any of it, although it's really not our call.
A lot of it is, a pace thing, in that we have to have this thing done so much ahead of time that, there could be. They might get through all the way through that Defenders show before we start shooting or something, or certainly before anything comes out. So we don't know where they're going to be. It's very hard, even logistically, to keep the movie characters synced up. It's nearly impossible, given the speed that TV cranks out.
The story
and
that they eat up. Yeah.
Well, it is interesting that sort of the power infrastructure between Disney and Marvel has changed a bit in the past year, and I'm curious, how has that affected the 2 of you as creators, if at all?
We talk to the same people. I just get the impression they have to talk to fewer people.
Yeah, there are fewer stages of notes. There are still notes, but it's more focused now, which is great.
Looking ahead, you guys are writing the big capstone at the end of Phase 3 as we know it. What are you both most excited about looking forward in the MCU after Civil War?
After Civil War?
After Civil War, before Infinity War? I mean, Thanos is a really nice opportunity, right? To write a villain, give him a lot of screen time, try to do the best you can to make people empathize with him in some perverse way.
In terms of things we're not writing, I really want to see Captain Marvel. I'm really looking forward to that. And Panther. I mean, I don't know how much screen time Chadwick has in this thing. Maybe 10 minutes, and he's awesome.
He nails it.
To be able to go to Wakanda and spend 2 hours there is going to be insane.
And I like that sort of one of our teases at the end of the movie is this look into Wakanda. So you guys was that something you guys shot?
There's everything. Well, we wrote everything that's in there. Yeah.
It varies, Marvel movie to Marvel movie, but this one was ours.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see what's next. Thank you so much for coming in,
Thank you.
chatting all
Pleasure.
things Marvel with us.
Thanks,
For all
Pleasure.
things Civil War, Infinity War, other Marvel
Other wars.
wars,
War. You got a war, we'll write it.
every war. Keep it here at IGN.